My name is Helen Cardias-Menos and I'm the Technology, E-Learning and Innovation Leader at PLC Sydney. Today I'm going to present to you on Storytime STEM, which is about solving problems using digital and emerging technology using quality picture books. Storytime STEM, or as I like to refer to it, interactive literacy, is an interdisciplinary approach that enables children to extend, engage, and explore on texts using digital technologies. So essentially, we're encouraging our students to communicate their understanding of their text, explore a text by reshaping its meaning or solving problems within the text, and ultimately create their own texts or objects using interpretations and the initial text as an inspiration. So I'll be referring to Storytime STEM and interactive literacy as interchangeable terms. And essentially, when I use it in my practice, I like to use technology and science inquiry skills to mirror traditional reading strategies and inferential comprehension strategies that we teach our students to explore and use with texts. So that's looking at language forms and features, encouraging students to write and respond to texts, and looking at reading and comprehension tools for different texts. So particularly inferential comprehension skills, making connections and higher order thinking, and visual literacy. I like to think of the traditional reading strategies or the framework of teaching comprehension as mirroring the framework that we use when we're encouraging students to take a scientific inquiry process. So when we might teach comprehension, we might use a framework like the Super 6. And within the Super 6, we're teaching our students to think and engage with a text by predicting or visualizing, making connections, summarizing, questioning, and inferring. By the same token, when we're teaching a scientific inquiry process, we're asking students to begin by questioning and predicting what might happen within their process, conducting a scientific inquiry, evaluating and communicating that scientific inquiry, and then looking at the data and information. So when they're predicting in a text, we're predicting in a scientific inquiry process. When we're questioning, summarizing, and inferring in a text, we're looking at the same sort of skills to evaluating and communicating in a scientific inquiry process. So using those two approaches and then integrating within technology, that's where we get interactive literacy. And interactive literacy is really, in its essence, about creating solutions to problems in texts through technology. So using our ICT capability framework and our digital technologies outcomes within the Australian curriculum to encourage students to use a design process and computational thinking process to communicate their understanding of a text, to create solutions for problems faced by characters in a text, to recreate or retell parts of a story, and ultimately create new things inspired by that story. So those skills of inferring, summarizing, visualizing, and connecting. We're also teaching our children today to be digitally literate. So that means investigating, interpreting, and reimagining information using ICT skills. So thinking about our ICT capability framework, we're encouraging our students to investigate with technology, create with technology, and communicate with technology, which is essentially what we're encouraging children to do or students to do when we're teaching interactive literacy and subsequently teaching comprehension. So inferring, summarizing, visualizing, and connecting. A big part of interactive literacy is the use of the design process or using design thinking to frame that interactive literacy process. So within this framework, we're encouraging students to use design thinking to generate ideas from texts and communicate their understanding by creating a design solution with a range of technologies. And that could involve using a range of different materials, describing and using different systems and components, and using tools and equipment. So a big part of interactive literacy is using digital technologies, and there are various types of digital technologies available for use within this process. These are just some that I've used in my practice. Many of these are available across schools across Australia. Many are free. Some you may need to purchase but are not necessary. So some of the things I've used are things like Book Creator, Seesaw, and Keynote, which are accessible by every school. Things like Microbits and Makey Makeys you can purchase, but you don't necessarily need to. Microbits you can use online using an online microbit emulator through the website MakeCode. And so that could be sufficient enough. However, they're not very expensive. They're about $24 and readily available from lots of teaching supply stores. The other one that we do use a lot is the Merge Cube. Now, this is an augmented or virtual reality cube. You can print one for free off the internet, and I can share a link with you where you can access the printable Merge Cube, or you can purchase one through a teacher supply store for about $14. And again, Keynote is a free program and can be replaced by any presentation software. And I'm just going to give you some ideas of how I've done this within a K-6 context. So in kindergarten, my students were exploring weather as part of their scientific inquiry learning. And so we took the text, The Weather Girls, and we explored the text, and we talked about some of the language features of the text. We talked about some of the ideas in the text and how it connected to our learning in science. I work at a girls' school, so the girls then decided to take the role of weather girls themselves, and then looking at using ICT, we recorded our own weather report. So we developed our ICT skills of taking a video on the iPad, zooming, switching the camera around, modifying some lighting, and then used that to share with our families our weather reports as inspired by the weather girls. So it can be something quite simple as that. In year one, we took a visual literacy text called Be and Me. And within this text, we explored visual literacy. Within this text, we explored visual literacy skills and looking at things like lighting and vectors and color, and used that to interpret what was happening in the story. The girls then created their own visual literacy text by taking photos of things around our playground using our iPad. So again, building up those ICT capability skills. We then extended this further by encouraging our girls to write sentences about their photos to create a story and ultimately a book. Finally, they recorded themselves reading their text, created a QR code, and shared this with their family and friends, where they were able to scan the QR code and access the girls reading their text. We found this was a great way of teaching the girls about digital systems as well, and how things like QR codes work, how to use a QR code and how to use technology to upload photos, to type and to entering information, and also as a great way of then sharing their own writing and sharing their own stories and using visual literacy to supplement their story and their writing. So really bringing the whole process together. A great way you can do this as well is to add meaning to existing texts. So you can create QR codes that connect to videos of authors reading texts or of authors talking about aspects of their texts, and simply print them out and just pop them on the cover of the text or somewhere within the text so your students can access. So we did this, for example, for Mousetronaut, which is a text written by Mark Kelly. I linked it to a YouTube video from NASA, which is part of their Story from Space program, which involved an astronaut reading the story Mousetronaut from the International Space Station. And our girls were able to access the story and watch an astronaut in space reading this wonderful text. So adding that extra meaning and depth to that reading and to that interpreting of a text, and also giving the students the opportunity to use a digital system. In year one, we took it a little bit further and encouraged our girls to create soundscapes for texts that they had read and enjoyed. So we used the Colour Monster as our prime example, and we talked about some of the visual aspects of the Colour Monster. We talked about the story and the sort of emotions that our character felt in the story, and then we picked a page from the story and deconstructed that by looking at the visual literacy aspects, by looking at the language, and then talked about the meaning meaning that was being conveyed on that page. Using an app called Chrome Music Maker or Music Lab, which is free, the girls then created a musical pattern or soundscape to accompany the page. And we also explored sound waves further and soundscapes further by creating a sound wave or a visual representation of sound on the merge cube, which the girls then modified to reflect what was happening in the color monster. So looking there, we're connecting our visual literacy, we're making connections, we're using our adjectives and our language, and then linking through technology to represent our understanding, to represent data, and create with technology. In year 2, we took this further again, and using a design process, the students created their own toy. So as part of our scientific inquiry process, we were exploring toys and forces and how toys work. Within that context, we used a variety of different texts to simulate that discussion. And one of the texts we used was Dolly 1.0. And the girls really resonated with this particular text because it's about a little girl who makes her own doll. So within that text exploration, we looked at language choices, we looked at making connections and questioning, and then we looked at how Dolly or Charlotte used the design process to create her toy. The girls then used the design process themselves to create a toy for a friend. So we started off by interviewing a friend on what sort of things they wanted in their toy. They then designed the toy using a sketching process. They prototyped the toy. They made the toy using various craft materials just located around the classroom. And then we made our toy interactive like Charlotte did by connecting it to a makey-makey and coding the makey-makey on Scratch to make sounds. And this is what it looked like when it was finished. The toy was connected to the makey-makey, and when you touched parts of the toy, it would make a sound the girls had pre-programmed on Scratch. Now, thinking about the Storytime STEM of solving problems a little bit more, in year 3, we used that framework, and we used the framework of the design thinking to solve a problem in a text. So we took a text like Jack and the Beanstalk. We looked at various different versions of Jack and the Beanstalk, and we summarized what sort of problems the character of Jack generically faced in his text. And then we decided, well, how can we create a digital solution for Jack to help him solve his problem? So one of the things the girls decided would be a great solution would be to create some kind of technology that would help him transport things from the top of the beanstalk to the bottom of the beanstalk. So we created a Lego WeDo crane. So the girls built the crane, they coded the crane, they iterated and tested it, and in the end, were able to do a presentation to different classes about what sort of digital solution they came up with, how they built their crane, how they coded their crane, and how it was appropriate for Jack to use in his text. And that's just a video of the girls playing with their crane. Taking this further, we used a text called Row, Row, Row Your Boat and used our learning in digital technologies around data encryption and Morse code, and we created our own communication system. So within the text Row, Row, Row Your Boat, our characters are all in a boat and the boat breaks and they all end up in the water. So one of the problems they face is essentially they may drown. So the girls decided, why don't we make some kind of network communication system like a ham radio where they can call for help. So using the microbit, we built a networked communication system and we coded it so one microbit would talk to the other and send a distress call. And then to build on this further, we decided another solution might be to build a better boat and maybe build a more technological boat. So looking at the visual cues in the text, we determined it was quite an old type of boat, not very techno-savvy, just pretty much made of wood. So what if we added some motors to it or some kind of technology to make it move faster? So in order to iterate that, the girls created a air-block drone boat and coded it to save rubber ducks in our book. They also designed a digital technologies boat using augmented reality on the merge cube and talked about how the features of their boat would be appropriate for the characters in our text. In year 3 again, we used the story, The Three Little Pigs, and decided that we needed to build a solution to help the three little pigs from the big bad wolf. So we started off by testing the different materials that the pigs had used to create their houses. So we built a house of straw, a house of sticks, and a house of concrete. And you can see from the images there, the students were all given the same base material. So to develop that fair testing within our scientific inquiry process, they all had a plastic plate and Play-Doh as a foundation. They were all given bits of straw and stick that were the same length, or a tile that was the same size, or a group of tiles that were the same size, and they built the 3 different houses. They then tested those houses using a hairdryer. And we decided the best solution would be to create some kind of alarm system to let the 3 little pigs know when the wolf was at their door. So using the Makey, we built a pressure pad so that when it was pressed on, it would sound an alert or an alarm on an internal system to let the pigs know the wolf was there. And the girls built the system, connected it with the Makey, and then coded it on Scratch. In stage 3, we explored gamification through a text called Rock, Paper, Scissors. So within the text Rock, Paper, Scissors, it talks about the creation of a game, essentially the game Rock, Paper, Scissors. So the girls decided that they would create their own games, and we used this text as a stimulus and followed the same sort of design process that the character in this text had used to create the game Rock, Paper, Scissors, and the girls designed their own board games that incorporated the microbit in it. And that's just what some of the codes that they used. And this is a good way as well of thinking about creating choose your own adventure stories. So you can use some of the codes that we used for the microbit dice, for example, as a way of creating choose your own adventure stories or modifying existing text so that it represents different paths that characters might follow in a known story. And this then taps into the branching outcome that we teach in digital technologies around stage 2. Finally, in year 6, we used a wonderful text called Mechanica, and the girls built their own Mechanica. So essentially Mechanica takes place in the future, and in the future all animals have been roboticized and computerized. So we brought to school lots of bits of old technology from home. We ripped it apart, we pulled out circuit boards and wires, and then from that the girls used the design process to create their own Mechanica, like the ones that you see on the screen here. Picking up from that, they not only made a Mechanica, but they made a description of their Mechanica to go into our own Mechanica field guide. So the girls published their own version of Mechanica using their own Mechanica that they made, and then their own text that they produced. And we did end up sending the text to the author, and he was quite pleased to see this great interpretation of his initial work. So there's just some, final pictures of the pressure pad for the 3 little pigs. And you can see how it works and how engaged the girls were in the process and how it added that extra dimension to the text. So that's all from me. Thank you very much. Please feel free to reach out to me, follow me on Twitter, DM me, or send me an email if you would like some more information. Thank you for your time.